Dr.Afif El-Khuffash, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Dan.
Oh, thank you very much for being here. How are you?
I'm good.
On
Great.
this beautiful sunny, what are we, Tuesday?
It's Tuesday and it's lovely and sunny outside, and we're in this, we were just saying, this lovely enclosed man cave.
It's completely dark when you walk in.
Completely dark, and it is how I like to operate. It's how I like to work.
You and me both, sir. Absolutely. Yeah,
I know.
Really appreciate you being here. I'll give people a little bit of context. I was really looking forward to this, have been looking forward to this conversation. When I reached out to you originally, it was off the back of two recommendations, completely separate from each other. One was my sister, who is a midwife, who worked, I'm not sure if she worked directly with you, but worked in the hospital with you and was very aware of you. And she asked me, would I have you on at some point? And the second was a good friend of mine who actually delivered her baby under your care.
Yes.
And independently of each other around the same time, both asked me, would you consider having Dr. Afif on? I said, well, I'll have to check him out first. Within about 20 seconds, like, yeah, I'd love to have a conversation. So
I know you're protective of who you get on your podcast, isn't that right? I'd be the same, because I get recommendations for people to come on mine, and then you have to sort of check them out first. Isn't that right?
Yeah, so, I feel a responsibility to people who are listening, because they're giving me a lot of their time. So in the past, I've had, it's not necessarily recommendations. I find those quite good. It's when people reach out themselves and ask to come on the podcast. Now, it's not that there's millions of people reaching out to come on the podcast, but there's generally a self-serving interest there, which is fine. But if that doesn't line up with what the listener's here for, which is knowledge, information, empowerment, value, it's kind of I have a filtration process. You passed it immediately.
Well, I'm honored. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for being here. Afif, what I like to do at the start for conversations like this is just clarify a few terms for people, just to set some context.
Yes.
For people who might not be familiar with your profession or your background or what you do. So I'm not going to ask you to give me the story, but I'm going to ask you, would you mind just giving us the brief 101 on exactly what it is you do? Because I have here neonatology. You're a professor of
Professor Pediatrics.
Pediatrics, yeah, yes. I didn't want to get that one wrong. And you're also a lactation consultant, which got me really, really interested.
Yes.
Too, as well as being a digital artist, an editor, a podcaster, all of the creative pursuits. But from a medical, in the medical arena, would you mind just giving people a bit of context on your experience and your expertise and qualifications?
Yeah. So, first and foremost, I trained in pediatrics, and pediatrics is basically medicine of childhood. But that's quite a broad term, and it spans from literally birth until 16 years of age. So even within the specialty of pediatrics, there are subspecialties. So you could be a pediatrician that specializes in children's hearts, kidneys, brain, gut, whatever. But also then there's a further subset within pediatrics called neonatology. And neonatology is a special field. Initially, it was almost an offshoot of pediatrics that has now become a specialty of its own. And that is caring for newborns. And it's generally caring for newborns over the first few weeks, couple of months following delivery. But that also encompasses caring for preterm babies, so babies that are born before term, sometimes as early as 23 weeks of gestation. So it is a very specialized field. You dive deep into a very specific skill set. It encompasses intensive care, because these babies need to, be on breathing machines and things like ECMO, and we can talk about that. But back in the day, neonatology used to be part of pediatrics, but now it is completely separate. And the fact that I call myself still a neonatologist/pediatrician is almost a legacy issue, because in Ireland, we are unique in that our training to become a neonatologist includes going through pediatrics first. So you train in medicine in childhood, so you get exposed to the broad general medical knowledge in pediatrics, and then you subspecialize in neonatology. In many other countries, those two paths have been completely separated. So you can get into neonatology almost immediately without actually doing pediatrics. And, there are pros and cons. I kind of like the way I did it because it gives you a broader base, broader knowledge, more insight into medicine in childhood and pediatrics. So my day-to-day work is in neonatology. So I don't do a lot of pediatrics. But in Ireland, neonatologists have a wider scope of practice than neonatologists in, let's say, the UK, Australia, North America in general. Their job would be only in the intensive care. So you're only dealing with critically ill newborns. And once they become well enough to leave the intensive care, you're no longer caring for them. They go under a different specialty. Whereas here, um, we look after babies at all through stages of their critical care. There'd be intensive care, high dependency, special care, and we actually look after them in the outpatients, some of them until they're 2 years of age, to make sure that they have done well. Again, this follow-up element after discharge from the hospital in other countries is done by different specialists. So we do a lot more in Ireland as neonatologists. It can be sometimes busy because you're doing the job of sometimes 3 people in North America, for example. But I like it because you get to see the end result of what you do. I think you build much better relationship with parents, with families, much more personal connections, and I think it keeps us grounded. Um, and then on the academic side, I'm a professor of pediatrics at the Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland. So, this sort of job is slightly separate. I'm involved in teaching, sometimes medical students, neonatology, but also involved in doing a lot of research as well.
Okay. That was a huge element of what really attracted me to your content specifically before I met you, was your emphasis on education. A lot of the content you put out, the podcast, the reels, were really focused on helping me as a person, as a consumer, understand, as opposed to just telling me the information, which I find it's a subtle difference sometimes, but giving me the information and helping me understand the information, I think that defines a good teacher from a not so good teacher. So it's a huge part of why I enjoyed and still enjoy the content you put out there. I think when people listen to a conversation like this, I could probably define them in 2 broad categories. Parents, obviously, going to be very interested in what you have to say and the conversation here. But there's a lot of discourse today around the impact that our childhoods and our births and the traumas around that have on who we are as people now. And there's a lot of people, specifically around my age demographic in their 30s now, starting to unpack their pasts and try and figure out who they are and what's happened to them, why they have certain behaviors. And there's a lot of roads are leading back to this conversation around, well, this is because this happened to me when I was a child, or this is what my birth looked like, or this is the stress my mother went through. So I think whether you're in either of those categories, it's going to be quite an interesting conversation today. The educational side of what you do and the practical side of what you do you find at the moment in the general landscape of medicine that those 2 things coexist quite comfortably, or is there, because I would view you as not an exception to the rule, but quite unique in terms of your approach or willingness to get out there as a practicing medical professional and get involved in the world of social media and podcasts and that messy place. Do you find that challenging? And do you think that's the norm at the moment, or is it kind of a little bit outside the norm?
It's definitely not the norm. And interestingly, I am one of few medical professionals that is becoming prominent on social media. And most of my colleagues shy away from social media. Some of them don't even have Instagram accounts, Twitter accounts, or if they do, they're creepers, right? So they don't actually produce any content. They're just following content, which is fine. What I found was beginning to grate on me over the last decade or so is that there is a lot of people going on social media for various reasons, and they offer bits of information here and there. And what I found was an almost exponential increase in the amount of misinformation and maybe disinformation out there on various topics. And originally, I was the person that just had a small social media footprint, if you like. I was there mainly for consumption, for entertainment, or even sometimes it's good to actually keep on top of the latest medical research and things like that. But I found that there's a huge amount of misinformation out there, and I felt that I should maybe try and counteract that, not by challenging whoever is putting the misinformation or disinformation out there, but actually starting to give evidence-based information in a digestible, understandable way to people. Not really for any self-interest, but to genuinely try and provide people, mainly parents, with information to just empower them to try and, navigate raising their children, because it's a minefield out there. And the interesting piece on the education is I like to think of myself as a kind of simple guy, is that the way I teach on social media is the way I teach anybody. I don't believe that you should have a different approach to teaching different disciplines. So this is exactly how I would teach medical students, um, postgraduate, doctors during their early years, more advanced people. So I'm hopefully going to be traveling soon to give 3 talks, 3 high-level talks. I always break it down to simple terms that everybody can understand. I avoid using medical jargon. I avoid using complicated words, because even within, let's say, medical experts, there are people who may not be able to understand English very well. There are people who may have some challenges understanding difficult words. So the way I teach is actually the same across all the different disciplines. And initially, I was quite apprehensive. My wife was saying, you're putting yourself out there, you're opening yourself up to criticism, and everybody will be watching. If you say something wrong, um, you may not be able to recover from that. And I don't think it's that simple. I've said wrong stuff in the past, but I think the grown-up thing to do is to actually own up and say, I said something wrong. This is why I said it. This is why I thought it was the right thing to say at the time. Now this is what I think. Because, you may get new information. You may get more relevant information now. And the grown-up thing to do is to say, okay, my recommendation on this specific thing has now changed. And the interesting thing is, when I was starting to do the podcast and we got to a stage where I would have loved to get a lot more experts within pediatrics to come on to talk about topics that would be relevant to parents, I found it a challenge to actually get people to come on the baby tribe that were pediatricians. And I had to work hard to convince them. And I had to sort of reassure them to say, look, this is not live. You can listen to the whole conversation afterwards. And if there's anything you don't like, I'll take it down and things like that. And I managed to get a few people to come on, and then I would send future guests those episodes to say, look,
It's safe.
it's safe. We've never had anything. They've always been met with real appreciation from parents. And one thing about doctors is that we're dehumanized, right? A lot of people think that we operate at sort of in a different dimension. And it's funny because sometimes on my Instagram page, I curse, or I, say something really funny, and I get a barrage of messages saying, gosh, it's really surprising to see a doctor actually joking around or cursing. And some people may view that as, you're not professional enough. But I think most people would actually find it relatable, that you can actually, that you are human. I put a video yesterday of, I have a little miniature Yorkie, and he was doing something bold, and I was trying to run after him. And he does this thing where he's so small, he goes under the dining room table and stands in the middle, so you can't actually reach him. And he go to the other, and you run after him. So I filmed this, me trying to catch this little dog. And the number of people that said, it's so weird to see a professor of pediatrics yelling after a little miniature Yorkie trying to catch him,
Yeah.
But I think we need to show people that we are actually human as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'll give you my perspective on this particular issue from someone who exists in the content world. My business is a production company. I work with a lot of different businesses on how to effectively use the tools that we have to communicate a message or a story or whatever it is they're trying to do. I think you're obviously very familiar with the hierarchy of evidence from a research point of view. I think we have a strange hierarchy of evidence created now with this thing called social media, because people seem to put a lot more weight onto the vanity metrics. So, for example, you have a fitness influencer with 1 million followers. That carries so much more weight in the psychology of the average person than a professor of pediatrics, simply because they have all of these people following them. Traditionally, they would have had to do something pretty remarkable to have this admiration from all these people. So they're probably worthy of all this admiration. But we have completely flipped that now, and there is a way to hack the system, so to speak, and grow a big social platform, a big audience, a big following, without necessarily having those attributes. But we still have this perception in our head that big number equals big authority. So I think my observation of people in the medical world specifically having a resistance to this, I completely understand it, because this is a world where things are twisted and manipulated and are not as they seem. And unless you're very well versed, as you now know, because you've done this for a long time, it can very quickly you can be misinterpreted, you can be attacked for no reason, you can become the focal point of hate and anger from groups of people who have found each other, and you are the reason that their child has had to wait 3 years for an appointment with an occupational therapist, because you're the only representative I can see, and you're on social media chasing your dog. Why aren't you off fixing all these problems? So I completely understand it. But what I always try and build this conversation around and try and appeal to people is to develop a system for better curating the information. And what you have said to me there is, by you breaking it down to really manageable, understandable kind of bites of information and making it relatable and humanizing yourself, the only people who could possibly have a problem with you are people who have been converted by the machine. So I think if I find myself having an issue with you chasing your dog, or you expressing some humor, or you cursing on your page, I think the question for me is, do I need to step back from this platform and really understand what's happening to me when I engage with this? So it makes it really, really tricky for people to find the information that they need to help them, which is the biggest point that I have on this page here, which we discussed beforehand, is like, how do we as human beings who exist in this world, this digital world with social media and all of this information, how do we build a skill set to navigate this world? I can understand it from a technical point of view, because I know how these algorithms work. I know how the platforms work. You're familiar with them as well. Most people have some sort of knowledge around that, but it still doesn't turn that key for us in terms of when we see the big number, we see the 1 million followers. That's probably the best source of information.
It's very interesting how you frame it, because although it might seem on the surface that this is something unique to social media, it's actually quite a big thing in medicine as well, in terms of putting your trust in a piece of information. Most people, as a first glance, will look at these almost useless metrics, right? So, for example, going back to social media, you're absolutely right. People weren't actually heeding me, and I was never getting any pushback until I reached maybe 10 or 15,000 followers. I used to say whatever I wanted to say and nobody cared. But since I've started developing a following, that's when people actually start maybe listening to you more, counteracting your points more, because we put a value on the number of follows. That's the first thing we look at. We look at how many people are following this guy or this person or this woman, and should I continue engaging with them or not? I find myself doing that. If somebody contacts me about something, the first thing I go is look at their page and see how many people are following them. So I'm victim of that as well. And then I actually have to consciously take a step back and say, hang on a second. I don't care about the number. Let's see what their page is about. Let's see what they're saying, because that's the important thing. It's not the number of followers. And going to medicine, there is a hierarchy of medical journals where people publish in. Some of them can be really hard to get into, and I'm sure you've heard of them. New England Journal of Medicine, The Lancet, Nature, things like that. When I started getting into critical appraisal, you would be surprised at the number of rubbish articles that get accepted into those journals. But the first thing that people say is, oh, but it's published in The Lancet. It must be robust. I must believe what it says, without actually looking at the actual paper itself, the pieces of information in it, doing a critical appraisal, trying to put away the fact that this is published in The Lancet. And it's hard. It's human nature. Whoever hasn't watched Black Mirror should actually watch Black Mirror. I don't know if you've seen the episode on your kind of self-worth was based on your metric, based on how your
like a social credit score.
The social credit score
episode.
I mean, that's
real life.
It's actual real life. Yeah. It's actual real life. If you look at who gets invited to talks in the media, in the news, it's based on their following. The media only begin to give a sense of worth to a person once they have 100,000 followers. Oh, come on to our show. Not because you have something to say, but because you have that much following. So you could fight it. but I don't think that's going to be anything worth fighting. But you can try and just navigate within the system and accept that this is how we are as human beings now. And this might sound like something, strange to say, but you're going to have to be able to navigate that system. So one of my initial aims was I need to amass a certain number of followers, not because I wanted to reach a certain number, but because I wanted to be heard. And it's hard to get heard unless you start, amassing the followers. And then more followers will come once they actually see that what you're saying makes sense. And it's not about what you're saying, it's about how you say it as well. We all know, and I'm sure yourself, Dan, know that if you frame something negatively in a scaremongery way, it spreads like wildfire.
Yeah.
Whereas if you frame the same piece of information as something positive, it doesn't get as much attention. And I've seen all these YouTubers now giving you marketing advice saying that, oh, you need to actually use negative words in your title. You need to start framing things in a negative way. 10 things to avoid, rather than here's what you should do to try and improve this. But it's how we work, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, one of the biggest, most famous marketing books of all time is literally titled Fear. It's fear. It's how it works. You can look at traditional media, forget social media. Nothing makes the paper unless it's going to elicit some form of negative emotion, because that's what makes us pay attention. And it's funny because there is an ethical conversation around this, but I'm not the person to answer the ethical question, should they do this? What I'm more interested in is how do we recognize the game, as you said, and not resist necessarily the game, because that will always be a part of human nature. There will always be somebody or somebodies or an entity who will take advantage of the vulnerabilities of the human condition, which is the normal makeup of who we are. So rather than resist that, can we understand it? And I've often said this. The first time I learned this, actually, Afif, was in the medical world. I trained as a physiotherapist, but I worked in a clinic and was exposed to a lot of medical professionals, doctors, surgeons. And the first time I actually learned this lesson was around steroids, because I had come from a sporting background and only understood steroids in a negative connotation. And a lot of doctors were using steroids to do incredible things. And I was like, okay, it's just a thing. And it's the intent and application that dictates the outcome and the impression we have, because I had a friend who had a very positive experience with his doctor using steroids to help with a condition. And then I had seen the gym environment around steroids where it had really negative connotations and some really poor health outcomes. So it wasn't the thing, it was just how the thing was used. Same with social media, same with everything. Alcohol, everything can have, as you said, the frame you put on it and the intent and action around that is really, really important. So for me, it's less now. I used to be rage against the machine and, this is all terrible, let's get them to stop. One, it's probably pointless. I'm not a negative type of person, but it's probably not going to make much of a difference. But number two, it's actually much more empowering for me to realize that I can control how I interact with the thing. Therefore, I don't have to be a victim of it. So I have social media and I work really hard to try and manage my relationship with social media. I haven't deleted it off my phone. I use it for my business. I use it to research you. I use it to connect with people, but I'm also very conscious of how it's using me at that time. And that's something that I find very empowering. So for me, it's less about rage against the thing that's doing the wrong, I suppose, and more about how do we understand it so we can interact with it. And you mentioned a phrase there that we've discussed a couple of times, critical appraisal. How should I, say I am Dan the painter, I have no background in the medical world, I have no connection to it whatsoever except when I go to the doctor. How should I build a framework of critical appraisal based on my experience, my exposure to all this kind of stuff in a world that's completely alien to me and I feel very vulnerable because it's my health and I don't understand it? How can I build some tools? What is critical appraisal? How would you approach that from somebody who maybe doesn't have an academic background?
I mean, critical appraisal is an issue for, even people in academia, unfortunately. So then to go and expect a person that's not in the medical field or not in academia to try and be able to understand a piece of information and take a step back and think about it rationally to say, can I believe this? Can this be generalized? Does this apply to me? Do I believe the person saying it? Does the person have an agenda behind what they're saying? Critical appraisal almost encompasses all of that, is understanding whether a piece of information or a conclusion came from a valid methodology, and a valid source. So when we look at, for example, studies, we look at internal validity and external validity. When we talk about internal validity, we look at the design of the research. Did it select the right patients? Or did it pick patients that it knew are going to give them the right answer? Was the exposure, the thing that I'm interested in studying, was it accurately measured? Did it apply to only half of the population? Did the other half definitely not have the exposure? Did I measure it correctly? Looking at the outcome, the end result of what people are saying, was it accurately measured? Was it framed in the right way? And then looking at the external validity, do the results or this piece of information, does it apply to the general public, or does it only apply to the specific people that were studies? Supplements, for example, is a big thing. We extrapolate a lot of adult supplement data to children and say, okay, well, this is beneficial in adults, it must be beneficial in children. And you see all these products marketed for children. We see a huge surge of marketing supplements for children every time as we enter into the winter, right? Right around, now middle of September, for example. Oh, take the supplements to boost your immune system, to try and reduce this and that.
You had a particular phrase you used, predatory marketing.
Yeah, and it preys on vulnerable people in a specific situation to try and hit a chord. Everybody's afraid of their children going back to school, going into creche, and picking up all these viruses and, markers that will say, I'm going to market a product for this vulnerability and say, well, if you take this, you'll boost your immune system, and then you'll protect your child. But if you actually dig deep into what they say, their claims are very clever. They say, like, help support the functioning of blah, blah, blah. They'll never say it will reduce your chances of X and Y, because they know they can't actually stand behind that. So they even what they say is a roundabout way of trying to get you to buy something with no real end results. Formula marketing, for example, I always find that incredible. I have no issue with families using formula. I support families using formula all the time. It's beneficial, it's healthy, it's nutritional, but the marketing of it is what I have an issue with. And you see things like saying, inspired by years of breast milk research. That phrase means nothing. I don't know what that means. And then they add things like advance or gold after certain brands and double the price. When you look at the ingredients, they're almost the same. Help support the healthy growth of children. But everything you do helps support the healthy growth. Again, all of these phrases have, if you actually take a step back and think about it, they have no real meaning. So to go back to your question, critical appraisal is really having the ability or the tools to try and figure out whether the piece of information that you're hearing is real or not. And there's a lot of things that you sometimes must look at to try and figure that out. And it's really hard, but some basic principles is, anybody offering you a quick fix?
Probably not the truth.
Probably not the truth. There's no quick fix for the majority of things. Anybody saying that you come to me or you follow my course and I will solve, your problem, you always kind of worry about that. Anybody that their sort of livelihood depends on you fearing a certain thing is always something to watch out for. For example, if you have a person that's selling, a course to help with a colicky baby or a baby that's crying all the time. If all the babies stopped crying tomorrow, they'll be out of a business. That's something to watch out for. If people are, creating a sort of scenario for you that may not be real, but it may be sort of anticipatory, like, 10 things you should do right now to try and avoid some certain outcome in the long term that may or may not happen to you. You must adhere to this. Oh, here's a supplement that I'm selling you, or here's a course that I'm selling you. Again, you need to take a look at the whole thing. People often sort of look at, doctors and say, they get paid too much. Sometimes paying somebody too much means that they couldn't care less whether you follow their advice or not. I know that may sound harsh, but you may then rest assured that they're not trying to sell you something, right? So when I give a piece of advice, I don't get upset if people don't follow it. I don't benefit financially from them following it, and I don't benefit financially from them not following it, right? So that might sound like a cynical way of looking at things, but unfortunately, we do come to a stage where we have to maybe think and say, okay, if I follow this person's advice, how is this going to benefit them, right? And I always tell people my stuff on my page will always be freely available. I'm never selling you anything. Do I have self-serving interests? Yes, absolutely. I'd be lying if I said I didn't. I like being in the social media scene. I like increasing the exposure to my Instagram page because I want to draw people, for example, to listen to my podcast. That is my sort of one of my motivations. But in parallel, I genuinely want to provide people with evidence-based advice so that they can be empowered to actually, navigate this messy world of early parenthood. And I think people should, or we should probably create a course of critical appraisal for everybody, because I think it would really benefit everyone. Unfortunately, even us in the medical field, doctors are very bad at critical appraisal. We take a lot of the research studies that we read at face value. And only when you start delving deep into the methodology, how it was done, how it was created, you will see, gosh, I don't think they picked the right people. I don't think they measured the outcome the way they did. I'll give you an example. Put up a post recently about a certain vaccine, and I mentioned a couple of companies. One company's medication was discontinued, the other one wasn't, but there was still hesitation in using the other ones because it was quite similar to the one that was discontinued. And I sort of outlined all of this. I got an email from the head of sales from the company that,
Wow.
yeah, like, because they just saw my post on Instagram to say, well, we'd love to share with you some further data to prove that our product is completely safe. And we'd love to meet you in person to further talk about this. And she sent me a link to this to the study that on the surface, it was a well-conducted study that showed, yes, there are no adverse effects. But then you look at the fine print. The two main authors were being directly paid by the company. So they have to declare this, but it's in fine print at the very, very bottom. They're receiving direct payments from the company. So that already creates, they're not independent. And the way they selected the population, they could have easily not selected all the patients that have had adverse effects, because it was like a 1-for-1 selection, and they had control into who they entered into the study. So again, most people would probably gloss over that fact and read that piece of information and say, oh, yes. Now, I'm not saying that you may not believe the data that's in there, but it just adds another layer of, hang on a second, they're being paid by the company that's promoting this product, right? And that creates bias. Always look for independent investigators, meaning that investigators that aren't funded by the company that's marketing the drug that they're introducing. And that can be hard sometimes. It can be hard to get funding to actually do large-scale research as an independent investigator. We struggle with getting grants all the time. Okay. That's a long and roundabout way of trying to answer your question. But
no, not at all, Afif. I'm going to wade in here, right? I'm going to wade in with my boots on, because I have some thoughts on a lot of what you said, and thank you for sharing that as well. I think, first of all, the first point that jumped into my head, I heard something that was very helpful to me a good while ago, somebody defining the word charlatan. And in general, if somebody promises to have a solution that nobody else has that can fix a problem, but refuses to share with you the information until you invest in some way in them, it's probably not true. And that has rung true in almost 100% of cases that I've applied it to. That's literally the definition of a charlatan. Somebody tells you, you have a problem, I can fix your problem. I'm not going to tell you how to fix it, but you have to buy my course, and then I'll tell you. You buy their course, and then whatever. And in my experience in the health world, most solutions to most problems that most people are dealing with when it comes to metabolic health and general lifestyle medicine, I suppose, I'm not diving into specific conditions, can be improved with information that's readily available, that every professional will share with you readily. You probably never gatekeeped telling your patients or clients that maybe a little bit of exercise might help, and maybe picking a diet that's anybody who says it's something else, they're probably lying. So that's the first thought that came to my head there, that definition of charlatan. It's a good filter to run through, especially in the world of social media, where people are usually selling something. Now I'm going to offer some nuance to that. Sometimes people do have very interesting techniques and modalities that can help and can work, that are less than traditional, I suppose. But I think you being hyper aware that it's very unlikely they're going to fix anything about you, that you already have most of the information, and that if this person is very forthcoming and is really open and honest about what they're doing, why they're doing it, and people have done it with before, maybe worth exploring. That's kind of the filter that I use. If someone says, I have this thing, I'm like, okay, well, here's my process. And most things don't get through the filter. I think also a huge issue that we're experiencing now is trust. So you, as an experienced, qualified medical professional, have just said something that it's like wildfire at the moment. Sometimes people have incentives to present information in a certain way in the medical industry. And I think the pushback against that is tinfoil hat, bro science, all this kind of stuff. And you have this just dialogue in the middle here where people are losing trust. But sometimes losing that trust is detrimental, because now you don't trust the medical system, and all doctors are trying to get you to eat bad food because they want you sick so they can treat you forever. You have this narrative. And then you have the ultra, if the data says, it's the data. Trust the data, nothing but the data, follow the science. And we had an experience 3 or 4 years ago where this was very prevalent in the media, obviously through lockdowns and COVID and all that sort of thing. So you have this complete lack of trust and understanding around, look, what is actually going on. And to hear you explain that this is how it works in certain situations, that does not necessarily mean we throw the baby out with the bathwater, forgive the phrase, in the context of the conversation. There is a huge amount of value and trust. Most of the people, if not all of the people I've met who are practicing medical professionals, have the same incentive. They want to help. They want to educate. They want people to be healthy. They want to give quality of life. That's almost everybody I've ever met. I've never met a medical professional who I got the feeling they want me sick so they can keep me in the system. Yet people will hear companies are paid to produce studies to get you to buy their medicine because they have a financial incentive. And they're like, but hold on, if all the people in the system are good, how is this still allowed to exist? And how are doctors able to practice? And how can I walk into a doctor's office and the information they give me could be based off a CEO in a big company looking after their bottom line?
Yeah. I mean, if you look at the incentive, I'm sure people are aware of the Sláinte Care contract that has been put out, and a huge number of consultants have actually taken that contract.
Could you give a brief outline just for people who might not be familiar?
Yeah, so the Sláinte Care contract is a public-only contract, meaning that if you take it, that you have to work in the public system, you get paid well, and you can only do private work once you fulfill your
public commitments,
which is around 37 hours a week, right? Most consultants are already doing that. And they're like, great, I get paid more. I'll be able to do private, and I'll still do that. And what people kind of forget is, we want you to be healthy. We want you to stay healthy. I'd love if there were no more preterm births from tomorrow. I'll still get paid my full salary, but I'd be twiddling my thumbs because I'll have nothing to do because everybody's healthy. So in fact, our incentive is to keep you healthy because it's less work for us. And what people forget is, consultants will get paid whether you're sick or not. And when they are giving you a piece of information, it's likely that there is no underlying, dodgy incentive. Now, of course, you can never generalize that. But by and large, doctors that are giving you advice are genuinely giving you advice to try and help you, to try and improve your lifestyle, to try and reduce your chances of becoming ill. Because, that's why we went into medicine. We genuinely want to help people. And again, you very rarely would find a physician offering a quick fix for something. It's never the sexy thing. And, I've learned that from actually having so many physicians come to my, to the podcast. And, I always ask them, give us a top tip to fix X or Y. Because I had doctors from very different disciplines. And I'll give you a genuine example of we know that mental health is an increasing, or mental health issues is an increasing problem amongst our children, right? And we know that access to mental health services is a significant problem, right? And I had a psychiatrist on the podcast, and she acknowledged that and was talking about the challenges in children accessing mental health services and outlining the issues. And I asked her, while parents are waiting to access mental health issues, what can they do? Give us some top tips that they can do. Do you know what she said? Having a routine, eating a meal together, going out for a walk every day, being exposed to sunlight and fresh air. And she was like, I wish I had something sexy to tell you, but most people actually don't do that if you think about it. But it's not sexy to say, go for a walk, have a meal, have a routine in your life, have a meal together. But these are the things that genuinely help slowly and gradually. Again, they're not a quick fix. You mightn't feel better immediately. But if you start instilling this routine, better communication, doing this and that, your mental health may slowly improve until you access services. So again, naively, I was expecting, oh, here's a little thing I've been gatekeeping until today, and I'm going to give you this exclusive, Afif, you know? But no, it's never...
Always the basics.
Yes.
The low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, but you see, no one can sell you that.
Mm.
You can't make money out of that.
Do you remember the Liver King?
Sorry?
Do you remember the Liver King, Brian Johnson?
Yes, yeah.
I found it such an interesting study in human behavior, because everything the Liver King said, I was like, I can't disagree with that. Now, I don't think everybody should just be eating carnivore and all that kind of stuff, but the Liver King was the packaging for what actually was quite good advice, but he couldn't sell good advice without the Liver King, because he's like, what is he saying? Go for a walk, have a good connection with your family, sit down and eat together, as you were saying there, exercise, sleep well, avoid a lot of electrical interference. And I was like, when I go through his 9 tenets of health, whatever it is, I can't really disagree with 90% of what he's saying here. The problem with the Liver King was that he was lying about steroid abuse, number one, but he had to create the persona to sell normal life. And people were paying all of this money. And then obviously supplement lines and stuff like this come in. So there was a massive financial incentive for him to create this character. But everything he was saying was the same. And I find that with a lot of different, not casting shade on any different groups or tribes nowadays, but like you hear people who are carnivore or vegan or whatever it is. And there are, in some cases, legitimate reasons why people make these lifestyle choices for themselves. But in a lot of the cases, it's tribal, because this person will say, okay, what we're going to do is only eat this one thing. And we also exercise and move and go for a walk and focus on breathwork and quality of it. But it's all about the thing. It's all about the carnivore or the vegan. And people become extremely tribal. And what I find happens then is they then forget about the fact that Afif said the exact same thing. He didn't say, take your top off and chase down a wild animal and eat it raw. But he did say 99% of the other things. So it's the same messaging really across it all. But you have to have the packaging to sell it. Because if you can't sell it, it's free information. It's readily available out there already. And I think again, it's an interesting human thing that I found working in, not as a medical professional, but working in a medical environment with the doctor I work with in the clinic. A huge amount of people were conditioned to come in and ask for the solution, ask for the pill. And in a lot of cases, and you can speak to this directly, I found that a lot of doctors have no choice because they have very limited time. They can't sit down for 2 hours and discuss your lifestyle, your sleep, your stress, your job, the quality of your relationships. They can ask a quick list of questions, cover the important bases, look for red flags, and then prescribe based on their training. And we are conditioned then to think that's the only way to do it. So I'm going to not take care of any of the other elements of my life, come in and ask my doctor to fix me. It's now your responsibility. And I'm abdicating my power to you, my responsibility to you as the doctor. So I'm not saying we shouldn't obviously respect our medical professionals, but I am saying it's a collaborative relationship, in my opinion. Again, very, very cognizant there are some people who can't engage in good lifestyle practices. They might be very ill. They might have certain commitments or responsibilities that maybe disqualify them from this. But for a huge amount of people, we actually have the ability to improve our health markers massively. But we have been trained by this system to completely depend on the answer, which I think is why these charlatans succeed, because we're familiar with this. I go to the doctor to get the answer. I go to this professional online with 1 million followers, and their course is the answer, because I'm just conditioned to abdicate responsibility.
So I'll give you a perfect example of this, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
So there's a condition in newborns called colic. I'm sure you've heard of it, where babies, usually in and around 3 weeks of age, begin this high-pitched, sudden onset episodic crying from usually in the evening time. And no matter what you do, babies will cry, like almost in severe excruciating pain, and then it settles. It can last, it's called the rule of threes. Starts at 3 weeks, lasts for 3 hours every evening, goes away at 3 months. Okay? And the key is that it usually goes away at 3 months.
Okay.
Right? So no matter what you do, it will go away at 3 months. So you have families coming to you at 6 weeks, having had a 3-week period of this chaos, and they want a quick fix. Now, there are certain things that you can do, and there are certain, therapeutic approaches that you can do to try and minimize the severity of it, but there is no quick fix. The only fix for it is time. So I could sell you anything and tell you it'll take a few weeks to work, and then it will naturally improve with time. And then people will say, it's because I went to Afif and he told me to do X, or he offered me this. And you see this. The reason I do colic is because so many people use this condition to try and sell something. Okay. You have people advocating for craniosacral therapy. You have people advocating for, this pill or that pill or this method of feeding or this type of formula. When you see so many different approaches to treat something, and when you know that the condition is self-limiting, meaning that it will go away eventually, you can actually sell anything. I could say, right, I have this hymn that you can sing to your baby 3 times a day, and it will eventually make the colic go away. And people will probably believe me, because of my credentials. So what I do for parents when they come to me with this, because that's a big part of why people come and see me in my clinic, I acknowledge the severity of it. I empathize with them. And I am honest and tell them that there is no quick solutions, but here are tools that you can have to try and help you deal with it while it's happening. Tell them that it will go away. And then at the end, you can suggest, okay, well, there is this thing that we can try. It works in some babies. Give it a go as well. But just to let you know, there is no quick fix. Again, it's something that's hard to sell when you acknowledge that there are no quick fixes, that this will probably get better with time, whether you do it or not. But also acknowledge with parents that it is difficult and there's nothing easy about it. A lot of the time they will accept this. Often people are worried, gosh, if I don't give them something or prescribe them something, they'll feel that their visit to me is wasted. And sometimes there may be pressure on a doctor to prescribe something or implement a change in what they're doing, change the formula, change this, change that. Yeah, you can try all of these things, but you have to be honest from the outset and say, look, none of these things are likely to help. Some of them might, some of them not. And I'm sure there are countless examples of things like this. When you were saying about, the chasing the wild animal and eat it raw, it's probably the act of chasing.
The movement and
exercise. The movement and exercise is what's making things better for you rather than the actual, eating the animal raw.
Can I ask you a question then? I'm very interested in this. If we acknowledge, and if we don't, you can correct me here, but if we acknowledge that obviously science and the scientific process is incredible, but there are areas that we will never be able to accurately study and provide empirical data for due to the nature of the thing itself. Because, as I said, there are too many variables we can't control for. It's unethical to, for example, test certain groups with control groups, etc. So there are certain things, many things probably in life, that we will never have empirical data for and can point directly to it and say, this is the black and white answer based off the research that we have. If we acknowledge and accept that, if somebody comes to you with a particular condition, maybe colic is not the best idea or best example in this case, because it's a fairly linear pathway of the progression of the condition. If somebody comes to you and says, Afif, I have this thing going on, this health thing going on, now completely accepted, acknowledged, you've presented the the current understandings and treatments, etc. But I also have this thing over here that's been presented to me. The person has been very forthcoming. I'd like to try it. It's not going to cost me a bomb. It's. Are you open to people doing things like that? Because I know from experience that even the idea that people are doing something that's contributing to their health, that idea of the placebo effect is huge. Once they're not being taken advantage of, or once it's not, like a lot of this stuff is actually harmful, once it's not harmful in our understanding to health, how do you feel about people trying other things? Because that might work.
Great question. And I actually bring it back to colic because,
Okay.
bring it back to colic because a lot of parents ask me, what about craniosacral therapy?
Mhm.
What about baby massage? What about this? What about that? And my answer is always the same. Absolutely. Go and try all these things. And I emphasize a lack of evidence is not the same as no benefit. We just don't know whether these things work or not.
Okay.
Right? I'm not telling you that they don't work. I'm telling you that I do not know that they work. And I can't recommend them as routine. But if you want to go and try it, absolutely do. But here are the caveats that you should watch out for when you are trying something like that. Like, make sure they don't do neck manipulations on the baby. Make sure they don't do X and Y. So, and you know what? I'm all for trying something that is not traditional, provided it's not harmful. I mean, I take mushroom supplements to try and help me sleep. Do they work? I think they do. And I know the nights that I don't sleep as well. Is that a placebo effect, or is that a real direct effect of what I'm taking? Who knows, but it works for me. And I know that it's not harmful. So when I do this in my life, I'd be a hypocrite to stop parents from trying things. But my aim is, as you said, is to make sure that they're not going to do anything that is potentially harmful. And sometimes it can be hard to decipher. So for example, if they say, can I try, I've booked with an osteopath, I'll say, absolutely, go. But just make sure that these are gentle motions, blah, de, blah, de, blah. But if they come to me and say, can I try this herbal medication? I'm a lot more confident to say, no, don't, because we don't know what's in them. And one herbal medication can be completely different. And babies shouldn't have anything other than milk for the first 6 months. You shouldn't be giving them herbs and tea. So there are things that you say, no, absolutely don't. I would strongly discourage you from doing that. And there are things where you are pretty confident that there is no potential harm. And it's like you said, it's all about harm. First, do no harm. So it depends on what they're suggesting that they want to try. And then as a healthcare professional, you need to be honest to say, look, there's no evidence that this works, but it doesn't mean that you shouldn't try it, because it might actually work for you. But if they come to me with something that you know could potentially be harmful, you say, look, on balance, I would be nervous about you trying this for your baby because of that. Now, that's rare, and I never say, no, don't do this and that if I know that there's no potential for harm, because ultimately you want to avoid harm. If it does good, great. If it does nothing, at least you've tried something. And like you said, the placebo effect can be significant.
Absolutely. I love what you said there, because it's something that I'm really passionate about at the moment, because of this cultural movement of influencers developing, building tribes, and it's becoming very divisive based on their specific brand or color of whatever it is they're selling. You have this pushback of the ultra data driven people who say, if there's no data, it does not exist. And I loved how you phrased that there. Just because we don't have data that it works does not necessarily, which is an important word I feel, mean it doesn't work. So let's again use our skills here and say, okay, well, first of all, is it potentially dangerous? That's probably the first place to go. That's a red flag straight away. If it's not potentially dangerous and you think it might be beneficial, just because there's no data doesn't immediately eliminate the potential benefit. And I think, now I'm going to mention a name here. I actually really like this guy and his content, Lane Norton. Are you familiar with Lane Norton? He's traditionally, he was in the kind of the strength and conditioning world, power lifter, but he's very, very data driven. I think his tagline is literally, he has this: data is greater than your feelings, and he's trying to remove emotion from information. My issue with that, I like him. I like his content a lot. My issue with that is, we are emotional beings. You can't just remove the emotion all the time. We are dealing with, especially in a non-academic world, people who make decisions based on emotions. People go to the doctor because they're scared. They're concerned about their health. That is an emotion you cannot avoid. You can work with the emotion, but we can't just eliminate the emotion. But someone like Lane takes the approach of, if the data isn't there, it does not work or exist. and very rarely deviates from that. I find that a problem for me and anybody else who's not in Lane's world as well, because immediately he's taking power away from me again. I can't go through this process anymore of saying it might help. The placebo, very powerful. How we frame things, I'll speak from a personal point of view, how I frame things in my life pretty much dictates the quality of my life.
So if we adhered to his approach in my field of neonatology, we wouldn't be able to treat any baby for any condition. There is so little evidence
Wow, okay.
for a lot of what we do. I know people might find that surprising, but there isn't a lot of evidence for a lot of the therapies that we do in neonatology. And if I said, as a rule of thumb, if there is a lack of evidence to this thing, then I'm not going to use it. I'd say we'd lose a lot of babies because, as I said, a lack of evidence doesn't mean that something doesn't work. It can be sometimes impossible to study something in a systematic way, right? And if you have a physiological basis for something to work and you've seen it work and you're making sure that, crucially, making sure that you're not causing harm. That's the key thing. And that's something that we always have to be mindful of in medicine if we're trying something in a baby. I want to make sure that it might work, it might not work, but I want to make sure I'm not harming the baby. I want to make sure I'm not making things work. This is part of my daily life in the intensive care unit. So I'd be a hypocrite if I didn't apply it to other aspects, right?
Do you have agency in your profession to make those decisions? I suppose I'm interested in a world that seems so tightly regulated. The more I learn about it, the more I realize, yes, there's guidelines and safety nets there, but there's a lot of art in medicine as well. There's a lot of not trying things out and seeing what happens. This may be a little bit too loose, but there is a lot of expression and a lot of, as you've just described there, seeing the impact within the bounds of not causing any harm. How much agency do you have as a doctor to work with that? Like, does everything you do not have to be approved and
so
sanctified?
We use off-label medication all the time, meaning that medication that's not approved for the purpose that you are using it for,
but it has been approved for another purpose.
I can never use a medication that is not approved for use.
Okay.
Right? One big example, Viagra.
Mm-hmm.
Right? What is the purpose of Viagra?
It's a vasodilator.
And people use it to maintain
so what is the well-known purpose of Viagra is to maintain erections.
To maintain erection. I give Viagra to preterm babies sometimes. Why? Because the blood vessels in their lungs are so tightly shut sometimes that all the conventional medications are not working, and as a last resort, I need to give them something that I know is a vasodilator, that I know works in dilating blood vessels elsewhere in the body,
mm-hmm.
and dilating blood vessels in the lungs in older adults, but it's never been really tested in babies. And I see babies getting better, but I have no systematic data to back up my practice. Yeah. So we do this regularly, right? And it's so varied that even we have 3 maternity hospitals in Dublin, the Coombe, the Rotunda, and the National Maternity Hospital, or Holles Street. We do things completely differently for a very similar condition, because each hospital has its own, I suppose, comfort with some medication. They see their own results. Yeah. And it varies. So there's a lot of art to it. Yeah. And there's a lot of unit preference for something. Sometimes it varies from individual to individual as well. But what unifies all of us is that we do not want to cause harm with whatever we're doing, and then it's all a package. So that one intervention that you do may not necessarily work on its own if you're also not doing X, Y, and Z.
Okay.
And that's the whole thing about assigning an outcome or assigning something that happens to you to one single event, either happening right now or something that has happened back, so saying I'm unfit now because I had a C-section 30 years ago. I mean, come on,
Yeah.
How can you associate one life event, one momentary life event, to something that is happening 30 years down the line, ignoring everything that has happened to you in between? And we do this a lot. We do this in neonatology as well. We do this in preterm infants. Prematurity is one big thing. We usually associate being born premature with adverse neurodevelopmental outcomes down the line. And there is truth to that. If you are born preterm, you're more likely to have issues in terms of your cognition, your school attainment, all of that down the line. But the really interesting thing is, and a lot of recent studies are coming out showing this, that when you account for everything else that happens to the baby after discharge, the fact that they were born premature almost doesn't matter. Not doesn't matter, but almost doesn't matter.
Okay.
And the way they looked at that is they did sibling controlled. So they got a whole bunch of families that had a child that was born preterm and a child that was born at term, at the normal, at the normal age, making, I think, a very reasonable assumption that these two children are going to grow up in a similar environment going forward, and they'd be exposed to the same exposures and factors, regardless of whether you measure them or not. You're making an assumption that those siblings are going to grow in the same environment. And when they did that, they found that the difference between the premature and the non-premature is almost non-existent when you account for everything else they've been through, which really emphasizes the fact that what happens to us is multifactorial. It is not dependent on one thing. And going back to the charlatans on social media, I came across a post recently saying that, I'm seeing a lot of people come to my clinic and they're all autistic and they all have one thing in common. They were all delivered by cesarean section. And if you comment autism, I will send you a link to my course that will help you deal with this to try and avoid your child getting autism. And guess what? Most people with a cesarean section don't get autism. And in fact, large studies shown that a C-section has no impact on the rates of autism at all. Yet you still have people peddling this and framing it in a way. C-sections are on the rise. Up to 40% of people are now born via C-section, right? In Ireland.
Why?
Various reasons.
Okay.
So you can ascribe anything to that.
Yeah.
If something is happening to 40% of people,
you can hook a lot of different things onto it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Donald Trump's probably going to get elected because 40% of people in Ireland are having C-sections.
Yes, exactly. But I mean, you can correlations is not causation, and that's the problem. It's really hard to try and filter out the noise.
Okay. You've segued lovely into my list here. I don't want you to burn through my list. You're bringing up a lot of the topics on here, but I think just before we go through these specific topics, it's very, very helpful that you've set the scene. We've had that conversation first to give some context to this. I think to link some of what we have said to some of these topics you mentioned there, people attributing something about the way they are now to something that happened in the past. Again, I feel, and let me just say this from a human point of view, I empathize and sympathize. I'm human. I do this myself. So this is not a pointing finger at people, but looking for the reason why I am the way I am. And if you present it to me, I'm going to swallow that up. If you give me the medication that's going to cure everything that I have, I'm going to take it because I want to get rid of the pain. It's usually pain aversion that causes us to feel like this. I don't want to feel like this. It's why I reach my phone. It's why I reach for the drink. It's why I distract myself constantly. I don't want to feel like this. I don't want to sit with it. So if you tell me that it's because I had a C-section, that's why I am the way. I don't have to take responsibility for everything else.
That's exactly it. You absolve yourself
100%
from responsibility. If you ascribe it to something that is out of your control, then you say, none of this is my fault. I don't need to take responsibility for it. No matter what I do, I'm not going to win. And the problem is people will capitalize on that. They will say, Dan, you are the way you are because you had a C-section. No matter what you do yourself, you're not going to change that. But guess what? I
can change it for you.
I have a course for you. So it already then shifts the balance of power to something that you can be in control of, to something that only I can fix for you. And that's what a lot of social media people do. They go to one specific thing that they know has happened to probably a significant number of people. You weren't breastfed. You had a C-section. And they then look at an outcome that is also quite common. Anxiety. We're all anxious now, right? And say, you're anxious because you had a C-section and only I can fix that.
Okay. So as I go through this list,
Yes.
is it fair to say, and it'll be topic dependent, but is it fair to say that each one of these probably is a contributing factor to potentially some of the things I'm experiencing right now? However, they probably pale in comparison to literally almost every other thing I have done in my life. The path that has brought me to where I am now.
Absolutely. And by me saying this, I'm not dismissing the potential
Yeah.
effect of something, but it could be a proxy to something else,
Yes.
right? It could be that, for example, let's take the example of breastfeeding. We now know that more affluent people are more likely to breastfeed.
Okay.
And people that are more disadvantaged are more likely to formula feed. Okay.
Do they have a why for that?
They have a why for that: more education, more support. They can access support. They can pay for support.
Ah, okay.
You know.
That's interesting.
So then you automatically say, "Oh, this kid is smart because she
Yeah.
breastfed." No, she's smart because her parents can afford
School,
a nanny.
college.
School, exactly.
Yeah,
You know. So although it may have a small contribution, it is probably a proxy for how well off that child is going to be. You know.
Yeah.
And again, the studies do actually show that when you adjust for all of these other factors, the gap in how children are when you compare formula to breastfeeding, the gap narrows. It's not eliminated. Now, that's important to emphasize. Breastfeeding is still, I think, on balance, has its benefits. But the difference between it and formula, when you account for everything else, narrows significantly.
I think I learned about this first when I read Freakonomics 15 years ago, probably even longer, 20 years ago, maybe. And the study would say children who were breastfed do better in life. And you're like, okay, breastfeeding makes you better in life. And they would just completely omit all of the other factors, as you've just explained there. They're breastfed, more likely to be breastfed because their parents are affluent. If your parents are affluent, more likely your path through life will be completely different. And I remember Freakonomics breaking down a lot more kind of cultural, social, economical kind of things, a lot to do with like crime rates. Have you read the books Economics or Freakonomics?
I've heard of it. I'm very familiar with it.
So interesting, just as a conceptual exercise to understand. Numbers are not what they seem and can literally be manipulated to tell you anything. And our issue as humans are when we have that confirmation bias, when we're looking for something, we can use the same numbers to prove that thing to ourselves. And I think in a lot of cases, because our identity is usually attached to whatever we choose to do for life. If you have somebody in the field of science studying breastfeeding, for example, they want to find a certain thing because on a personal identity level, it validates them as a person, who they are as a person. And then similarly from the identity angle, if I can now attribute my anxiety to my not being breastfed, I now identify as somebody who wasn't breastfed. And I can create more issues in my life. Oh, well, this book said that if you're not breastfed, this thing can happen as well. Your left foot can go purple. I think my left foot is starting to look a bit purple here, actually. And you develop all of these different, but it's so nuanced. Whenever I try and dig below the surface with this stuff, I realize it gets messier the deeper you go. It doesn't get any more clear. The more awareness you bring to it, actually, the more complex it gets. But for me, that does confirm what you've said there as well. It is way too nuanced. Like, I'm 36 years of age. Way too many things have happened to me between when I was born and now for me to be able to blame that for pretty much anything. There are so many other things that have happened that absolutely overshadow that I think it would be a little bit ridiculous, but I do understand why we do it, because I do understand this desperate need to figure out why I feel pain, and you've given me the answer, and all I have to do is buy this course. That's all I have to do. Okay, with that context set, let's go through some of these topics here. And just completely swallow with no critical appraisal everything that Afif says right now.
Amazing. Yeah.
I'm going to finish with this. I'm not going to tell you what it is yet because it's a good one. You mentioned prematurity there. I don't want to go too deep because you've given us some nice context, but in your experience and in your opinion, what are some of the challenges at the early stages, not necessarily my ancestral trauma, but at the early stages dealing with babies who are born prematurely from a medical point of view?
So when you say early, what timeline do you mean?
What is premature?
Oh, sorry. So, well, anybody born less than 37 weeks is deemed a premature birth.
Less than 37. Full term is 40 weeks, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, full term is 40 weeks, but people are defining full term as anywhere after 37 completed weeks, right? So anybody born before 37 weeks is deemed premature. However, we have a wide range of prematurity. So we have babies that can be born as early as 23 to 24 weeks. And then we have
Wow.
babies that are born, we call them, we used to call them near term, but now we call them late preterm. And the reason for that change in the term is when you call somebody near term, you're almost trivializing their prematurity. Whereas if you call them late preterm, you're still acknowledging
That they are preterm.
that they are preterm, but they are born within the later brackets of, after 34 weeks.
Okay.
They still may have potential issues in the early newborn period. They may find it difficult to regulate their body temperature. Their lungs are premature, so they may find it difficult to actually breathe effectively. And more importantly, their, suck swallow mechanism doesn't develop fully until well into their 37 weeks. So they mightn't be able to actually feed effectively. Some babies may do it, but a lot of babies don't. And then the more you go towards what we call is the limits of viability, the gestation at which it is impossible for you to survive outside the womb, it's being pushed down all the time. So we have units in North America that are resuscitating babies at 22 weeks. Some of them are doing 21 weeks. But that comes at a cost because your organs are just not ready for extrauterine life, and you have to really make do with organs that are not designed for life outside the womb. You're trying to almost kind of force them to do a function that they're not ready to do for another 3 months. And that includes everything: brain, liver, kidneys, guts, lungs, heart, all of that. They all come with their own unique challenges that we have to try and figure out. So a baby that's born at 23, 24 weeks, we all have an image of how our brain is, how it's folded up, how you see an image. If you think of an image of a brain, you sort of get this
Spaghetti.
This spaghetti. A brain of a preterm baby is smooth.
Really?
Yes, it hasn't started folding yet. And
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Completely smooth, like an orange.
Wow.
There are no the gyruses and the sulci. These are the kind of spaghetti folds that we see. That only begins to happen towards so they're born with like a brain that hasn't yet developed. And the biggest development in the brain happens in the 3rd trimester, and they're missing out on that. The trajectory of the development of all the organs changes once a baby is born preterm. It tries to adapt to to extrauterine life. I have spent the last 15 years studying what happens to preterm infants' hearts. Dedicated a lot of my time researching that, trying to figure out how to adapt to it. So a preterm heart is not designed to pump against high resistance. So a baby at 24 weeks that's in the womb, yes, the heart is beating, but it's beating against a low pressure system. The placenta is doing most of the work without getting too technical. So the heart is beating, to help the blood swish around, and it's not really pushing against resistance. If a baby's born preterm, the heart has to now, it doesn't have the support of the placenta. It now has to pump against blood vessels that have a much higher resistance, and it's not designed to do that. So it goes through this almost different trajectory of development. If Marvel fans who are big into the multiverse, there's this sacred timeline and there's all these strands that come out of it. All these organs now have to take these alternate paths because they are now in a different physiological environment that they are not designed to function in, and they have to adapt. And even their adaptive mechanisms are not fully in place. One example I'll give you that I think is absolutely fascinating is we all think of our heart as it beats, it kind of squeezes blood out of it to pump it into the blood vessels, right? As we grow older, I've got 10 years on you now.
We look about the same age, Afif.
So my heart is a little bit stiffer than yours. And as we grow, our hearts become stiffer and stiffer and stiffer. What stiffness means is that as they squeeze the blood out of the heart, their ability to recoil back to that open chamber to try and bring more blood back in so that it can pump it diminishes. So the heart becomes stiff. In order to counteract that, the heart begins to twist on itself. So the top part of the heart rotates in one direction. the bottom part of the heart rotates in another direction. Now, I understand it's probably difficult to visualize this, but I'll try and describe it as much as I can. And almost beats, but also does this almost ringing motion like a spring coil.
So with each beat, you get it.
Yes.
Rotation. Okay.
So then as it recoils, it creates almost a suction to help the blood coming back in, recognizing that it is stiff. This feature only kicks in your late 50s, early 60s when your heart becomes stiff. By the time that preterm baby born at 24 weeks is a week old, that mechanism is fully established.
Wow.
Because their hearts are so stiff. So their heart is already operating like a 70-year-old a week into their life, right? And we were the first people, by the way, to demonstrate this in our research in the Rotunda Hospital. Because even the equipment didn't have the fidelity to be able to measure the rotation. And a preterm infant's heart is 10 millimeters in length. So it's like the size of a small raisin. And being able to look at rotation is quite challenging, but we have the equipment to do that now. So fascinating. And then being able to recognize that and trying to figure out how to manage that is monumental. And there aren't studies to tell you what to do.
You're literally breaking new ground.
Yeah. And you're going to figure out, okay, this is what I think is going to work here. This is the type of medication that I think is going to help in this situation, and I'm going to try it. And then you observe, okay, it worked in 10 babies. I'm going to write this up and tell everybody, okay, I've done this in 10 babies. This is what happened to them. Now, this is not the same as large-scale studies. Most of the studies in preterm babies don't have thousands and thousands of babies in them. They have, 50, 60, 70 babies. And that's slowly how we build. So I've gone on a tangent here, but it's just an indication of the challenges experienced that we don't see in premature babies that we have to deal with.
In the context of, and congratulations on the research, by the way, it's incredible. In the context of what we spoke about earlier, the downstream effects, that sounds pretty severe.
So we don't know what the downstream effects are because only now...
You've identified.
But no, not even that. Only now we are having adults that have survived being born at 24 weeks.
Because medicine has advanced to the point where they now survive, and traditionally they didn't.
Correct. So, but what we're seeing now is an adult born premature that is now in their late teens, early 20s, have reduced exercise tolerance. Mm-hmm. They can't increase their stroke volume in the face of exercise. They have to increase their heart rate to try and match the cardiac output.
Okay.
The pressure in their lungs remains high. They have higher blood pressure, and they have very poor exercise tolerance, much longer recovery. So we are seeing long-lasting effects on this. Now, you could be defeatist and say, what can I do about this? I was born preterm, and this is why I have poor exercise tolerance. Right. But compare a healthy term baby, right, to a preterm baby and look at their trajectories. The healthy term baby is overweight, drinks alcohol, smokes cigarettes. And the preterm baby has done everything else right, keeping a healthy weight, doing a lot of exercise. If you compare those two individuals, I bet you that the preterm baby will have a much better cardiovascular profile, despite the fact that they were born premature. So this is why one factor that you can do nothing about doesn't determine how you are down the line. Genetics. Right?
Yeah.
Can you swear on this podcast?
You can say, please swear away.
I'm absolutely fucked in terms of diabetes and blood pressure. Okay. It's on both sides of the family. Like literally every aunt and uncle on both sides have type 2 diabetes and have high blood pressure.
So that train is coming.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's why I go to the gym 5 times a week and try not to eat chocolate, because I'm trying to modify things that I'm in control of. I'm not in control of my family history. I'm not in control of my genetics. But I try and maintain a healthy weight. I'm trying not, I don't smoke, I don't drink. And I made these conscious choices because I know that I have these risk factors that I'm trying to modify. It's all about things that you can modify in your life. I have the genetics. Somebody else may not have that history, but are preterm. So we all have different things that we can't help, you know?
Yeah. So to maybe express my understanding of where we are at the moment of the conversation, preterm, eliminating or balancing all other factors, environmental factors, preterm teenager and normal term, full term teenager, if they lived the life the exact same way, there would be differences.
Yes.
And differences, measurable differences.
Yes.
However, because of that initial experience and looking at how a huge amount of our population live nowadays without that external stimulus. It's interesting, when I worked in that medical environment, I used to see people, I call it, first of all, the physical heart attack, and now we have like identity heart attacks and emotional heart attacks, but a huge amount of people would not make any significant change in their life until the D-Day, until the heart attack, until the stroke. Then they decided, okay, I have now had a scare, I will change my life. Very difficult to get people to change their lifestyle and habits, in my experience, until they have something, a big event that causes them to change. This person, preterm, has had that event right from the start. So they have decided, this is the path I will live my life. And the average person, again, what is the average person? But the average person probably has not had the event yet. And so there's a lot of room for improvement in the lifestyle factors that they could potentially look at. But like for like, there's a measurable difference because of the preterm birth.
And that's why large-scale data always show a difference between one variable and the lack thereof in the other group.
Yeah.
Because these large-scale studies will equalize everything else, right? So if you look at preterm versus term and follow these kids, yes, preterm babies will have these issues. And there are now established studies demonstrating this, so it's indisputable. But that's on a global population level. But when you look at it individually, yes, exactly what you said. And people say, well, what's the point in doing this research if there's nothing you can do about it? Well, first of all, there might be new therapeutics coming that we may be able to modify the course of whatever. But that's, that's a longer sort of aim or something you try to achieve. But if you were able to tell the parents, look, your child is at risk of X, Y, and Z because they were born preterm. So it's super important that you don't give them sugary drinks at the start, that you implement healthy lifestyle choices from the start. It might maybe be more effective, like you said, because you have a big event that you can identify, that you can pinpoint to. Genetics is not something that you would kind of care about as much because it's not in your face, right? A family history of something is not as impactful as I was born preterm.
Yeah.
You know?
And there's a phrase I like, which just based on your sharing of the diabetes story there, genetics loads the gun, lifestyle pulls the trigger. I always like that one as well.
Yes.
So you can overcome, maybe is a strong term, but you can live a very happy, healthy, fulfilled life if you manage your lifestyle factors.
Yeah.
And you made an interesting point about these big observational studies as well. You used the word equalize. It's kind of ignore is basically another way of saying it. We'll look at one factor and equalize everything else. Basically ignore everything else depending on who's reading the study and decide this is the reason. Whereas like even if I had a twin brother, and we grew up in the same household, he will have different friends than me. He will maybe be in the room across the hall with sunlight coming in the morning time, and I could be in the dark room. And even though we're identical twins growing up in the same house with the same parents, there are still millions of variables every single day that dictate who we are and who we become.
And some you can control, some you can't.
Most you can't.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, most you can't.
Yeah.
But there are in terms of health and outcomes, I think the ones you can control, those low-hanging fruits, there's a lot left on the table for a lot of people.
There is. I mean, you mentioned it. Sleep is a big thing.
Yeah.
Don't smoke, don't drink, move, and eat well. These 5 pillars can almost trump everything else. I struggle to find somebody that sticks to all of these, right?
Because it seems too easy.
Yeah. I mean, I struggle with sleep.
Yeah.
And sleep is a big thing in your cardiovascular health, in your mental health. If I could fix my sleep issues, for example, I'd say I'd be invincible. But, that's my Achilles. I'd love to say that I watch what I eat, but a lot of the time I don't. So I don't smoke, I don't drink, and I do exercise a lot. So at least I've got 3 out of the 5. So even with the best will in the world, you probably can't stick to those 5. Sure you can't.
No, not at all. And I think this is why I constantly come back to this point. I empathize. I am the person I'm talking about here. I'm not casting judgment on people who don't take responsibility for their health. I'm trying to explore ways that because I have learned over the years to take a lot more responsibility. It's so empowering for me. I love consuming all the information, and I've built my own system for kind of curating the bits to come out, and it's always the same. Focus on your sleep.
Yeah.
Good quality relationships is a huge one as well. Surround yourself with the type of people who are going to support that growth for you and not suppress it or
Yeah.
whatever. Don't be consuming all of this negative media all the time.
People in a stable relationship live longer than single people.
It's incredible. I remember I'm not sure if you're familiar with Owen Lacey, the Irish Strength Institute.
Yes. Yeah.
Are you familiar with Owen?
Yeah.
I spoke with Owen probably 8 or 9 years ago now. And I just asked, I'm very good friends on the podcast all the time. I know Owen very well, but I spoke with him about 8 or 9 years ago. And I remember asking him, like, in your experience, on what are like the big drivers for positive outcomes with health? And I remember he started with sleep, exercise, nutrition, stress management, and the quality of your relationships. And I was like, what? Sorry? The quality of your relationships. How am I supposed to measure that? He's like, probably one of the best indicators for long-term outcomes. I could not get my head around this.
Yeah.
And in the 8 years since, I now fully understand what he means.
And also continuing to work, continuing to have a purpose in life well into your 80s keeps you alive for longer.
Yeah.
People that retire and just give up at 60 don't live as long as people that continue to work.
No, if you sell me the course, give me the pill. What's the pill? I don't want the advice. I want to give me the pill. I'll keep moving through these.
Yeah.
Well, I'll go a little bit quicker through these ones here now.
That's all right.
Just to try and again, just get some of the common dialogue around these on the table, and then maybe hear your opinion on them. And we've touched on C-sections, we've touched on prematurity. We've kind of delved a little bit into breastfeeding and weaning. I just would like to acknowledge the conversation that's happening at the moment. I have 3 children, and my partner's breastfed all 3, and she has expressed to me her felt experience of that. And it's really strange because I thought it was going to be the opposite. She feels in a lot of cases judged and undermined. Why would you waste time breastfeeding your child? God, there's so many easy solutions. You're making it harder on you. You're making it harder on everything. You're not going to get any sleep. I thought it was going to be the opposite. I thought she was going to be praised for doing this magical breastfeeding, and other people were going, but it's actually, the narrative is a little bit different from her experience now. And I have definitely noticed a battle around what is the right thing to do. You explained earlier on, you might elaborate a little bit on this, that obviously there are huge benefits to breastfeeding, but that doesn't take away or undermine or alienate people who decide, for whatever reason, who can't or maybe decide not to breastfeed as well. Could you elaborate a little bit on that?
So what I have learned, and I've interviewed so many strong, powerful women on the podcast, and what I've come to the conclusion is no matter what a woman does, they will be judged.
By other women, most likely.
By other women, by society. So whereby your partner has been judged for breastfeeding and has been told that there are a lot of easier things to do, the woman next to her who is formula feeding will be judged for not breastfeeding her children, for being selfish, for wanting to go out, for wanting to have a drink. What I find is that no matter what a woman does, she will end up being judged. So I don't think the judgment that your partner is receiving is because she's breastfeeding. It's because she's a woman.
Okay.
Because she will get it. She will get it regardless of what she's feeding. She will find somebody to judge her and criticize her, no matter what she's doing. And it's a societal thing. I think it's a societal thing to try and maybe control women, to keep them guessing, keep them in fear, because I don't know what the fear is of just giving women space to be able to just do whatever they want and live their life the way they want, and also become leaders. You see all the high-ranking women in politics. They're the ones being judged for taking mat leave or not taking mat leave, for taking time off to care for something or not taking care. Look how selfish she is. She didn't take time to look after her sick husband, or look, she doesn't value her job because she took time to care for her husband. And it's interesting. And I heard Deirdre O'Kane on their podcast with Emma Dorn, Keep It Tight, is you see how society begin to dismiss women once they reach a certain age, once they reach the age of 35 or 40. But it's only then that women begin to reclaim their sense of identity and begin to think for themselves and not having somebody hanging off them in terms of children. And that's when we automatically begin to dismiss women, when they reach a stage in their lives where they can reclaim their self-identity, when they can start thinking for themselves and not having to worry about, raising somebody. So I think there's a bigger societal kind of issue. But then going back to the specific breastfeeding thing, yes, I think breastfeeding does get a lot of judgment specifically. And I think it's because maybe the majority of people in Ireland don't breastfeed and they feel guilty for not breastfeeding, and they're projecting that guilt in that way. So I think there is definitely an element of that.
I think that's a fantastic point. To give my appraisal of the entire situation, whether it's breastfeeding or anything else, I think if you're doing something that I'm not doing for whatever reason, that either means that you're right and I'm wrong, or I'm right and you're wrong, and it has to be one or the other, because it can't be. But we can't both be right. It's politics. It's literally how the world works. It's division. One of us is right, one of us is wrong.
Yeah.
And I need to either convince you to do the thing that I'm doing to validate my decisions, or alienate you and vindicate you, and I'll make you part of the other. I need to other you,
Yes.
because then I'm validated. And I'm going to find people online who will help me as well. And we'll
Oh,
all
you
wave
will,
our flags.
yeah.
I'll find them. They're
Yeah.
out there, and they're on the internet, and I can
Yeah.
find them all in a nice little group now. And I think with the
Yeah.
breastfeeding thing, it's the same. The only women who have a go at women for breastfeeding are women who decided not to breastfeed themselves,
Yeah.
and vice versa, because it's an identity thing.
Yeah.
This means that I am not good or right,
Yeah.
because we can't both be good or right.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's unfortunate.
Yeah, very unfortunate. Yeah. And I think it's another point on the toolbox of critical appraisal we're looking at here. If somebody triggers you, whether it's they're breastfeeding or they drive a red car, whatever it might be, you drove a red car today, so I'm bringing it up. If that triggers you for some reason, you should probably step back and maybe have a look at why you're being emotionally activated by something that someone else is doing that has literally nothing to do with you.
Exactly.
Literally. And I think the claim is, I'm only looking out for you or your child. And my response is, you're not, and I don't really need you to. Thanks very much. If you genuinely were, you'd come to me with compassion and love, not with judgment. That doesn't really help anybody. My fiance is going to listen to this now and say, no, she's going to play this back over and over and over.
Yeah.
Come to me with compassion and love, Dan. She got a point. You mentioned sleep earlier on. Co-sleeping is one that comes up quite a lot.
Yeah.
I will give you the floor on co-sleeping. What have you heard? What are the misconceptions? What are the risks around co-sleeping?
Co-sleeping is getting a bad rap, and that comes... it's a legacy of the Back to Sleep campaign, when the rates of sudden infant death syndrome were rising, and recommendations came that a baby has to sleep on their back in their own sleeping space with no loose beddings, no pillows, and no gaps in between the mattress, away from the family. And that resulted in a significant reduction in the rates of sudden infant death syndrome. However, they have plateaued.
Okay.
And they have plateaued, and they have remained, they haven't continued to drop. They've reached a certain number, and they are kind of sitting stubbornly. They're still extremely low, but it's still there. And unfortunately, sort of co-sleeping got caught in between, and we as healthcare providers now are not supposed to recommend co-sleeping, because it has been attributed to an increased risk of sudden infant death syndrome if you co-sleep. But that's not the entire picture. I mean, if you look at us from an evolutionary sense, babies are not designed to be away from their caregiver, their mother, especially during sleep. Us as humans are woefully terrible at fending for ourselves for the first year of life.
It's actually mad, isn't it? We're brutal.
Sure, when you have animals literally being delivered and taking their first steps within minutes.
Like a horse galloping around a field 10 minutes after they're born.
Right. Humans are not like that.
Yeah.
So humans, babies, they need to be close to their mother. They need to actually stay close to their mother. And the problem I have with the current recommendations is that absolutely give parents plan A for sleep arrangement. Tell them the advice that I've just told you about reducing the risk of SIDS. But our problem is, as healthcare providers, is that we don't acknowledge that in vast majority of instances, plan A doesn't work, and we don't give them a plan B. And that's when things go wrong. Okay. If you ask parents honestly, between 60 to 90% will admit to co-sleeping over the first year of age with their children. And at any given night, about a quarter of families will co-sleep with their children.
Okay.
Despite us as healthcare providers telling them not to. So we either acknowledge the fact that it is happening and that the plan A is not working, or we just ignore it. And that's where I think SIDS will continue to be an issue, because we don't tell parents how to safely co-sleep. That's what we really need to discuss. The issue with co-sleeping is that I think that it exaggerates whatever other risk factors there are there for either suffocation or sudden infant death syndrome. Okay? If you look at all the research, and it's all about framing the results, right? Let me give you a headline. 50% of sudden infant death occurred while co-sleeping. What would you take out of that headline?
Co-sleeping causes 50% of sudden infant death.
Right? But when you look at the reality, and 90% of parents actually co-sleep, but only 50% of the SIDS happen with co-sleeping.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
You know, nobody tells you that if most people co-sleep, yet only half of the causes of death happen while co-sleeping, it's not the co-sleeping.
Yeah.
It's something else.
It's something else.
Right? And it is doing co-sleeping wrong is what actually
Okay.
is the problem. All the headlines, and this happens time and time again, and you see this regularly. You'll see a study that has looked at cases of SIDS. 60% of them happened while co-sleeping. 50% of them happened while co-sleeping. What they never tell you in the headline is invariably there were other risk factors there. Parents took drugs. Parents drank alcohol. Parents were smokers. There was loose bedding and loose sheets when the baby unfortunately passed away while co-sleeping. So it's not the co-sleeping, it's the other risk factors that have come with it. Co-sleeping, I label it as an effect modifier, right? So if I won't say you, if I as a parent smoked a cigarette, drank a pint, and took a Valium and went to bed, if I put my baby in a cot away from me, those risk factors that I have with me are not going to affect the baby, right?
Yeah.
But if I put the baby beside me, I'm going to roll over it. So it's not the fact that the baby was beside me. It's the fact that I had other risk factors. So co-sleeping will exaggerate the risk factors that are already there. So when you are co-sleeping with your baby, you have to be super extra vigilant that there aren't any other risk factors. And when you eliminate all the other risk factors that are associated with SIDS, the risk of SIDS does not increase with co-sleeping. In fact, there are some studies showing that it may actually go down a little bit, especially in breastfeeding mothers.
Okay.
So co-sleeping done right does not increase the risk for SIDS. The biggest risk factor for SIDS actually is smoking during the pregnancy and smoking after, or being exposed to secondhand smoke. So even if, for example, the father was smoking, even if they step outside of the house to smoke, the smell of smoke on their clothes, if they come into bed, is a risk factor for SIDS.
Okay.
So if you want to co-sleep, you can't smoke, can't drink, can't take any sedatives, and you have to really make sure that you adopt the safe co-sleeping positioning, with the mother putting her arm out in the sea on her right side, on her side, no pillows near the baby, no duvets or blankets near the baby. So there are a lot of things, and I really do advise parents to go and look at safe co-sleeping guidelines to see how to do it safely. But it is something that we need to tell parents about, because the scenario you hear time and time again is baby won't settle in their cot on their own. Mother is terrified of bringing the baby in to bed with her and do safe co-sleeping because she's been told all the time that co-sleeping causes SIDS. She picks the baby up, goes, sits on a couch in the living room and holds the baby up and hope that they fall asleep. She falls asleep. Baby slips down and suffocates.
Yeah.
That's the scenario that we get, right? Or sits on a chair in the kitchen and she falls asleep because she's exhausted and the baby drops.
That's harrowing, really, when you think about it, isn't it?
And I think a lot of it can be preventable if we can say, fine, do plan A, absolutely adhere to the safe sleeping guidelines, baby in their own space, on their back, whatever, all of that. But if that does not work, there are safe ways that you can co-sleep.
Yeah.
And that's what we need to do. And now there are a lot of jurisdictions that are changing their sleep guidelines to include safe co-sleeping advice. Ireland hasn't done it so far, unfortunately, and I think it needs to happen.
Okay. But I think this is what's like you've just expressed this on a podcast, and I'm sure you've spoken about this before as well. That's why I think these resources are so valuable for people once they can run it through their critical appraisal little filter that they're building here. It's very empowering and refreshing to hear you speak like this as well, because I completely, again, I'll say it again, if a parent or parents come into a doctor's office and they talk about co-sleeping,
They won't, you see. Sorry to cut you off, because they're afraid of the
you'll
judgments.
be judged by them. Yeah. Let's assume that they didn't and they talked about it. Your obligation, you don't have, there's no resources there for them, and you don't have an hour to sit with them and explain it. And also, it's very hard to get people to do anything. So you need accountability as well. You don't have that system to back you up. You have to give the guidelines. But what I would love people to understand is absolutely accept and acknowledge the guidelines. They're good guidelines, but also understand the limitations through which they're delivered and take them on board, and also explore other avenues as well, like listening to yourself speak on podcasts. And I find the more information you listen to, if you have your little critical appraisal skill set, your toolbox there, you'll hear the message coming through. You'll hear the main message coming through. And it's really difficult for somebody to understand that when you go to the place that are supposed to give you the advice, they're limited in terms of how and when and why they can give you that advice.
But you see, I would challenge that a bit, and I would say guidelines are there. They're there to guide you. You don't have to adhere to them.
Yeah.
Right? And I think the onus is on us as healthcare providers to, yes, say these are the guidelines, but if they don't work, you can do this safely, and here are the resources that you can access. That's within my remit.
Yeah.
I don't think that you should stop and say, I can only tell you the guidelines and nothing else. I think you'd be doing a parent a disservice.
Yeah, but I don't want the responsibility. You see, I'm going to ask you for give me the 101. I'm not going to ask you to give me the freedom. I even find this, like, if you have a new app or something.
Yeah.
If there's lots of flexibility, I'm like, oh God, I could make a mistake here. If there's only one way to do it, I'll do what you tell me.
That's why people love iPhone and don't like Android.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I love Android specifically for the opposite reason.
Exactly,
I've got the flexibility, but it is intimidating to think I am responsible to a certain degree. My healthcare professional will give me the guidelines and they will practice good care with me. But I am responsible if I accept responsibility. If I don't, I can point the finger somewhere else. And again, not a judgment call here, just an observation. Really.
Yeah, no, but you're right.
Yeah. I'm conscious of your time now, so what I'm going to suggest this live on the podcast. There's one big topic here that we haven't touched on yet that I would love, because I know you're quite passionate about it, but I would suggest, if you will do me the honor at some point in the future of coming back, we save digital health for another conversation.
Okay.
Because that could be an hour-long conversation, and I don't want this to run on too long. So if you're happy to maybe sideline that for now, I might pick one or two very small ones that we can just briefly run through, and then we can wrap this up, if that's okay with you.
Of course.
I'm going to go for these two: Calpol, Nurofen, and pain medication for young children.
Yes.
Is it overused? Is it abused? What is your understanding of the landscape at the moment?
First of all, you can give both of them together.
I did know that, actually. Yeah.
Yeah.
Only through my good partner who explained that to me.
A lot of parents don't. Are they overused in children?
As a coping mechanism, the child is crying. Give them Calpol. Give them Calpol. Give them Calpol.
Yeah, I think you honestly don't know, because most parents won't tell you. So it's not something that you can actually get a sense of whether it's happening or not. I think in certain situations they may be underused because parents are worried of using them, and there are situations where they are not needed. I think, to be honest with you, my experience, especially throughout the first year of life, that parents would be very nervous of giving kids Calpol, appropriately so. Especially, we would never recommend giving Calpol before 3 months of age, because a fever in a baby less than 3 months of age could mean a serious infection. And rather than trying to get on top of it and managing it at home, this baby always needs an assessment to make sure it's not something more serious like a blood infection or meningitis or a urine infection. So they always need to be assessed. But they would be useful following a vaccination. They would be useful in an older child that has a fever that is not severely unwell to control and get on top of. But again, giving Calpol for a child to help them sleep, I mean, if there's nothing else going on, Calpol in itself is not going to help. The Calpol that used to work is the one that also had an antihistamine with it, the Dozol. and it was
It was the drowsy effect of it.
it was the antihistamine that was causing the baby to fall asleep, not the actual
Like
alcohol.
gripe water I used to have.
Gripe water had 10% alcohol in it. Yeah,
Yeah.
not anymore.
Yeah. Not in the Republic. I think it's still the same in
I think you can get
Northern
it
Ireland?
somewhere. I'm not sure. Yeah.
Can I offer you a scenario and a question?
Yeah.
Teething
Mm.
can be a prolonged experience where
Yes.
children are extremely uncomfortable, in pain. Are there any issues once you followed the guidelines in terms of dosing?
Yeah.
Are there any issues with prolonged use of Calpol or Nurofen? And just for people, Calpol, paracetamol, Nurofen,
Is
ibuprofen.
ibuprofen.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, prolonged use is over how long?
How long does a child teeth for on average?
I mean, you could use it for 3 days, no problem.
3 weeks?
3 weeks, I wouldn't use it for 3 weeks.
Okay.
That's too long, and I would try and do other things to help a child with teething. There's a lot of things that you can, these kind of chewy toys that you can actually put in the freezer, and they're quite soothing. I mean, you can, in theory, use pain relief for an extended period of time, provided you don't overdose. But it's not something you'd advise at home without supervision, because they couldn't inadvertently, mix up the timing and overdose the child. Yeah, and that's why the recommendation is usually only for 3 days at a time.
But from a physiological point of view, I suppose I'm going into the weeds a little bit here, but are there any recognized negative effects from prolonged use of something like paracetamol?
And that depends from baby to baby. Some babies can handle it well, some babies don't. And you wouldn't leave a child on pain relief for that long without checking liver function for paracetamol and kidney function for ibuprofen. Yeah.
Okay.
And you can't do that at home,
Yeah. Again, it's funny. It just comes back to common sense.
Yeah.
It just comes back to common sense. If your child is in pain for that long, there's probably a reason. So
exactly
figure out what the reason is.
Yeah.
And if you think this might be a little bit excessive, it's probably a little bit excessive.
Yeah.
Maybe have somebody who knows what they're doing, have a little bit of an intervention or a look. Yeah. Common sense. Again, it's funny. It always comes back to this. I'm going to pick one more here now.
Yeah. No worries.
This might open up a can of worms, but we'll go here anyway because you touched on it briefly during the conversation. At the moment, there seems to be, this is an impression, right? Seems to be an increase in the rates of things like developmental disorders or autism, dyspraxia, dyslexia, ADHD. In your opinion, probably is a can of worms.
Yeah, no, that's okay.
Better detection? Is it actually an increase? Is there something driving this? Is it environmental in terms of diet and overstimulation, etc.? Is it a combination of everything? What's your take on that?
So we had a psychologist come on our podcast, and I've asked them that question, and it seems that it is increased awareness and better diagnostics that is leading to this perceived increased rate of all of these things. Now, it depends. I mean, you've thrown in a lot of issues. I don't think that the rate of autism has significantly increased, but there's no doubt that neurosensory disorders may be on the increased attention deficit, things like that. I think it's partly due to increased recognition, but it could partly due to a combination of factors that are creating a perfect storm. Social media, mobile use, lack of engagement with children, all the processed foods that we're eating. These are all on the increase, and it's hard to separate.
Most people are doing most of those things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Most people are doing most of those things. Giving birth at an older age as well can potentially contribute to that as well.
Geriatric mothers 35?
Well, they're called advanced maternal age.
Sorry.
Yeah, anything above 35. But the average age of delivery now is around 33.
That's the average, is it? Okay. Yeah.
So it is changing. A lot of mums have comorbidity as well. So, a lot of these factors, I think, may be contributing.
Okay. I think I should have separated that because a lot of these specific conditions will be linked in with digital health and things like that, and environmental factors. But that's interesting just about autism. It's quite popular nowadays. And again, you hear both sides of the story. You hear both sides of the argument. You hear the vaccine argument. You hear the dietary argument. You hear the lifestyle argument. You hear better detection.
So just on the vaccines, several large-scale studies have shown no association between vaccinations and autism. And the original MMR study that was published showing a link has been completely debunked, has been redacted, that it had methodological issues. It transpired that the main author was developing a competing MMR vaccine that they were trying to market. So they were trying to make the current MMR vaccine look bad. So again, all about critical appraisal. Despite all of this coming out and the paper being redacted, you're still having this huge anxiety, culminating in an outbreak of MMR measles across Europe right now, which is far worse.
Because of vaccine hesitancy.
Yeah, because of vaccine hesitancy.
Yeah, it's so interesting as well, because based on, I don't have a leaning, I don't get involved in the political side of things as much. Obviously, I'll have my opinions in private or whatever, and we'll live our lives the way we want to live our lives, and that's how I like it. But
And don't get me wrong, I fully respect people that are hesitant
Yeah.
of vaccines, and that's a completely legitimate thing to be worried about. But that doesn't mean that this hesitancy about a certain vaccine transcends into vaccines that have been well established for years and years and years and years and decades and decades and decades. I wouldn't hesitate for once taking well-established vaccines, but I think it's important to not dismiss people's concerns, because you shut down the conversation. That's when you get extreme views. That's when you push them to the side, and then it becomes an us against them. And people label people as being extremist, and people then are afraid of airing their concerns and things like that. Now, another example I'll give you, this new vaccine that has just been rolled out. I don't know when this podcast's coming out, but we're talking at the beginning of September, was rolled out, the RSV vaccine for all newborns. Yes, technically we don't have long-term data on this vaccine, but I would absolutely give it if I had a child, my own kid that was born today. Why? Because we have had a very similar vaccine that has been given to preterm babies for about 20 years. The difference between the two is that this current one is more longer acting. So you give one injection that gives you protection for 150 days compared with a monthly injection over the winter months. So you're actually given less of a very similar vaccine, and we haven't had any issues with that. But again, on the same vein, I would say absolutely no relationship between MMR and autism.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah.
And I've looked at this in depth several times. But again, it's not about having an anti-vaccine approach in general. I think you look at each thing individually.
I think that's possibly one of the most powerful things you could say. I think we are experiencing this idea of belief clustering at the moment, and this tribalism, and
yes, exactly.
You adopt a single belief, which means you have to adopt every belief of a specific tribe, and it becomes more polarizing because of the social media and the politics and the cultural science of it all. And it's the same with, you look at the conversation now around traditional vaccines and autism and that growth. It becomes so, what's the word I'm looking for here? Hyper emotional.
Yes.
And there's again that element of fear, and it's children. It's probably one of the emotional, most sensitive points around it. People will pick this hill and die on it with absolutely no evidence to back it up.
Yeah.
And my position in all of these conversations now, which has changed drastically in the last kind of maybe 10 years, drastically changed. I used to be very, very firm in my convictions with very little evidence to back any of it up. Now I take the approach you just mentioned there, and this is based on my personal experience and experience in the healthcare world. Everybody is different. We're very similar in many ways, but how we interact with everything is very nuanced because of everything we've spoken about. In my case, my 36 years of life have made me so unique in terms of how I interact and express different things. I'm not necessarily special, but I'm very different in terms of how all of these different things affect me. So my job and responsibility is to go through life and identify the things that feel right for me and that give me the best outcomes. And they are not going to be the same as anybody else. They can't possibly be, because I am different to everybody else. So separating myself from my need to be a part of the in-group or the tribe or accepted or validated or vindicated, whatever it might be, is the goal. It's my job. So understanding that just because I like this food and not this food doesn't make me an out person, because I want to take this vaccine but not this vaccine. I think the more on an individual level we can accept and embrace that, the less power the division, the agents of division, I suppose, will have over us. But that's easier said than done.
Yeah.
It's easier said than done. Afif, I'm not going to keep you any longer. That was absolutely fascinating, but I barely scratched the surface. I don't know, a lot of people say this, but
I can't believe we've been chatting for 2 hours.
For 2 hours, yeah. I usually don't let the guests see the clock, but I glanced at it there. Nearly 2 hours. Fascinating. Really enjoyed the conversation. Is there anything you feel is important to wrap up with? Do you feel we covered everything in the right context there? Is there anything you'd like to close on?
No, I think it's a unique conversation that I don't think I've had before. But just to, I suppose, the listeners, critical appraisal and being able to, I mean, it's a fancy word, but it's even just taking a step back and taking a bigger picture look at something is really, really important. It's becoming so hard to navigate through the information you get from social media, even from mainstream media as well, that you really need to actually, rather than just be a passive absorber of information, is be an active participant in trying to decipher and figure out what works for you or not, you know? And that's, I think, ultimately should be the message.
I love that. Be a participant. Where can we go to buy your course that's going to fix all of our mental ills?
Link in my bio.
Link in bio. If anybody on a serious note does want to engage more with your content, the podcast, Baby Tribe Podcast, available on all podcast platforms.
Everywhere, yeah.
Instagram profile?
Yeah, my Instagram profile, Afif.El-Khuffash. I'm the only one.
Shocker.
There hasn't been a fake account yet, which makes me sad.
There hasn't been a fake account yet?
No, not
you
yet.
haven't been initiated properly.
Exactly, yeah.
Would that be your main platform, the Instagram profile?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, perfect. And Afif, really, really looking forward. I'm locking you in on mic to the next podcast we're going to do.
Thanks for having me, Dan. I really enjoyed it.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.